guys. Welcome to another Midweek with Max. This is Rick, joined by JCV, Joshua, and of course our co-founder Max Sanchez. Couple things of note. Amigo of the Week has started. It's a new initiative where you can get recognized for your contributions in Discord on the Hemi network, etc., etc. Our moderators will be choosing Amigo of the Week weekly, and you can win an exclusive T-shirt that you can only get for winning the contest. And congrats to Broken on his design. Without further ado, kicking it over to Max.
All right, hey everyone, welcome to another Midweek with Max. A couple updates to kick us off. So on the engineering side, last few weeks have been working a lot on ZK provability, so making a lot of progress there. We got the HVM state transition, like I mentioned last week, fully ZK proof, so we're making some optimizations to that to squeeze a little bit more performance out of the ZK tree structure, and also adding in a few things to that data structure as quick wins that give us a little more flexibility in HVM for future precompiles. We're also working on getting the Jovian hard fork activated. So the main thing's not actually getting that scheduled, but we have a list of additional HEMI features that we want to get in and activate at the same time. So we're working on getting those to a close, including some updates to HVM to kind of a HVM 1.1, so not a full overhaul of anything, but adding a couple new features and fixing a couple of bugs or things that people have run into in some different edge cases. So we're working on that. We're also making good progress on the MinerFi front, so working both now on the backend side and the smart contracts for that. Hoping to be internally testing that in the next week or two here, and then hopefully doing some sort of public beta test in Testnet either later this month or early next month. So that's moving along and looking good. Let's see, aside from that, a couple of smaller items. We are still targeting end of this month as the drop dead date for the OG role, getting the Discord linking and being able to link everything, prove that you meet the criteria for the OG role, and then claim the tokens. We are going to do it, like we mentioned before, but just for clarity, there'll be a period of time that people have to register and actually do the claim in, and then based on how many people are in that claim group, then we will distribute the OG tokens proportional relative to how many people register within that time frame. So stay tuned for updates on when the claim process of that's going to start and how long it's going to run for, but that is going to be the mechanic we use for that. Let's see, beyond that, I guess one more update on the ZK side. We're also working on adding adding support for multiple proving systems, so moving towards prover diversity. And so probably the first version of ZK settlement to Ethereum is going to be a single prover, but we do want to quickly add multi-prover and have that working before we go with actually launch HBitVM and have instructions on Bitcoin that are a lot harder to change. Even though that is something we can change with governance and updating the sort of ZK wrapper, it's easier to have that available from day one and also better from a just general security perspective. So working on prover diversity as well. We will be open sourcing some of the ZK proof stuff in the next few weeks here. And there will also be some beta testing for the community for anyone who wants to participate. And we may or may not do more broad incentives because they're harder to track, but at a minimum, anyone who has the beta tester role and actually actively participates in beta testing some of the new ZK stuff, there will definitely be some, small amount of HEMI tokens as a thank you for testing it. It's pretty easy stuff to test, so it's, if you have, there will be some sort of like baseline for if you tested it and didn't find any issues, great. And if you do actually find a bug or an issue with it, obviously that would give a greater bounty for that. And I think that's pretty much it on the engineering side. So ZK provability, MinerFi. We are also internally, and I'll hopefully have more details to share on this in the next few weeks. We're working on a prototype L3 that sort of showcases kind of an MVP of being able to spin up a feature-specific L3 on the HEMI network and do some interesting stuff with it. So that is a work in progress, lower priority than ZK provability, MinerFi, and then getting eventually towards HBitVM. But something that we are looking forward to trying to at least run in testnet and showcase how it works and kind of use that as a first step towards chain builder. And I think that's pretty much it from the engineering side. I do have an update on the VBK side. So we are Still finalizing the list of addresses that are excluded from the distribution, so we're almost done with that. That should be coming in the next few days here. As far as we did get some questions about the conversion rate, and I can't share an exact number because we're still working on making sure we have all of the right addresses excluded. But at a minimum, it's going to be somewhere around zero point 0.1 to 0.15 HEMI tokens per VBK. Maybe higher, but that's a baseline minimum that it'll definitely be there or above. Let's see. Beyond that, I think that's pretty much it. We also have some stuff coming up with T-Trick Crypto. We're recording another episode of that this week, and we should actually be getting the previous episodes we recorded of that out soon. I don't have an exact ETA on that, but that is moving behind the scenes, so looking forward to getting that out. And with that, I will turn it over to Rick, and we can start going through questions.
All right. Um, let's see. Lutatio asks, when will veHEMI staking rewards be distributed?
So we did finalize on the accounting for it, so we should be able to get those out by end of day tomorrow at the latest. The updated number is going to be, let me get the exact number. Give me 1 second. It's going to be it's going to be 7.94 ETH split 45 45 10% from HEMI BTC, and then the last 10% is a HEMI token buy and burn. So 45% of that's going to be buying HEMI tokens for the distribution, 45% buying HEMI BTC for the distribution, and then a 10% burn. And we will post details on that for anyone who wants to look into the on-chain fees and sort of trace those through on-chain fees collected, and then on-chain fees paid by the protocol for DA and state republication, and then do the math to get that final number. That's the distribution from November 1st to basically February 1st, February 2nd.
All right. Ram asks, can you clarify whether there will be a mainnet incentive season 2? A second season is mentioned on your docs, but you've shared that staking will be used going forward.
We may do so. We're kind of in mainnet incentive seasons too, but we're doing incentives differently. So right now we're doing incentives with mostly things like Merkle campaigns, and so from one perspective, it's better because you get the rewards basically immediately. So whatever liquidity you're providing, you're getting paid a stream of whatever the reward token is, daily or depending on the rewards every couple days. But I think with Merkle you can claim daily. So that's the current approach. We may do something more points focused in the future. We do have some ideas for that, and it kind of intersects with some of the plans for the HEMI Ambassador Program and HEMI Station. So there may be a smaller version of that that we do in the future, but for now, we're sort of in incentive seasons too, where there are active mainnet incentives for providing liquidity to different protocols, and those are being instead of wrapped up in a more opaque points program, you're just getting immediate payouts of the assets for the liquidity you provide. You mentioned staking, so there's not going to be a staking component, as in like you have to. There could be, you can stake veHEMI and that gets you some amount of points or something like that, but there's never going to be a gated component to any future points program where you need to stake in order to participate at all, if that makes sense. So there could be like a multiplier or a bonus or something, but nothing would be gated by staking. The main goal would be to incentivize liquidity with a points program in addition to the current liquid incentives program.
All right. Mudakon asks, any more news on RanDAO to onboard NFT marketplaces onto HEMI?
That is still in the pipeline. I don't have an update, but I know there are ongoing discussions there, so it is going to happen. I just don't know the exact deployment date. I would guess sometime this month, but again, it's a third-party dependency, so a little outside of our control.
All right. Alpha asks, will there be any grants for creating projects, such as an NFT marketplace, on HEMI? What is the status of the grant program?
There definitely will be grants. I'm not sure whether the NFT marketplace would be specifically covered. So the way the grants program is going to work is there's going to be two tracks to it. There's going to be items that we definitely want somebody to build in the ecosystem, and so there would be a basically very lightweight technical outline of what it looked like, what the criteria is for fulfilling the grant requirement for, the minimum functionality basically of the DeFi app or stats dashboard or whatever the grant is for that you need to build in order to claim the grant. And if you're interested in that, then you could reach out. We would discuss it, and then you can basically reserve that grant if you're serious about building it. And then there'd be a second track of you come and you propose an idea for what you do want to build, and then we can work on A, if it's something that we do want to incentivize, and then if it is, what that incentive looks like based on the scope of the work and the timeline and the resources required on your side. And also for protocols that would need incentives for bootstrapping a user base. We can talk about that as part of the grants program as well. Obviously, it's a case by case basis, so it depends. If you're building some sort of DeFi protocol that needs liquidity, then obviously you need some incentives to bootstrap that liquidity, get people to actually start using the protocol, versus something that's more of a public good, where the grant program wouldn't include a incentives piece for growing a user base because that's not really relevant to the protocol, but it would still have uh, rewards for actually developing and maintaining the project. So that is coming soon. JCB actually did a bunch of work putting together sort of a early outline of the grants program based on some other previous discussions we had in the past and some new research on kind of what's going on in the crypto market today. So it is in progress. Hopefully we'll have more on that to share in the next couple of weeks here. But yes, there will definitely be a grants program. Not sure if NFT marketplaces are going to be something that we incentivize. It kind of depends on what people want to build around that. But it's definitely, if you have a cool idea for an NFT marketplace, do reach out and we'd be happy to discuss. And then for any of those other items like building some of the Bitcoin DeFi primitives around HVM and HBK, stuff like that, those will be enumerated with a lightweight tech spec that people can review and see if that's something that they're interested in building.
All right. We got a couple VBK questions. I know you covered a bunch of it, so if anything's redundant, by all means, just say uh, already handled or something to that effect. You can make a buzzer sound or whatever feels right. Poison asks, when will the first Hemi distribution for registered VBK participants take place?
We should be getting that out shortly. The last dependency is just getting that final list of non-participating addresses figured out, which means that the remaining addresses would get more tokens. So we are trying to make sure we get that correct. That should be happening again, like I said, this week. But there are external dependencies for other people who have to review it besides just me. So hopefully end of this week. But it is we do still have to finish that converter to make sure everyone actually gets the right conversion ratio. And like I mentioned before, the conversion ratio at a minimum will be 0.1 to 0.15 Hemi tokens per VBK. So maybe a little higher as we finalize the list. That's a very, very rough number, but that is a minimum for sure on the conversion ratio.
Right, and that actually tackles the next question. So we'll move on to the following and final VBK question we have. The NiStar asks, do you have an estimation on how much the VBK supply will actually be claimed? And if participation ends up being low, is there any plan to redistribute the remaining pool to participants?
No idea how much is actually going to get claimed. If it ends up being a very small amount, then potentially there could be additional tokens distributed at some point, but more than likely it's just going to be a fixed conversion ratio, and whoever does come and register for the distribution in each of the distribution phases would get that ratio. And part of that is the distribution is going to be, we want to leave it open for a fair amount of time to give everyone a fair chance to register and claim their tokens, since obviously there's probably a lot of people from far back in the VBK project who it may take them a while to hear about the claim process and actually figure out how to do it and sign the messages and submit them on chain and everything. So it is going to be a fixed ratio. Again, if we get very, very few claims, maybe there would be some sort of small additional incentive, but basically it's just a fixed ratio.
All right. Mudakon asks, is the release of the HBit VM tech in Tunnel Phase 1 still anticipated between April and June? And will this result in a higher volume of tunneled to Hemi?
So yes, we are still targeting Q2. We also are, and I'll share more details if this ends up evolving into something that makes sense. We're talking with a few other people in the space for partnering on some of the tech pieces that HBitVM is basically not innovating on. So all of our innovation focuses on the most of it is on the ZK proving system, and then there's another part on the incentive design and being able to use a Bitcoin MEV marketplace to make the protocol more efficient. And so there's other people in the space that are building reusable components for different parts that are separate from the parts that we're uh, changing and modifying to make the system better. So some of that may also help accelerate that, or at least get it to mainnet a little quicker and shorten the amount of time that we have to spend in testnet. But we are still targeting Q2. As far as TVL, I would definitely expect it to increase TVL because it's now a secured by math version of Bitcoin tunneling, and so I think that's a much lower risk for people to swallow and understand. But it will take people time, I think, to understand how the system works and feel comfortable with all of the. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. There's a lot of new ZK tech. There's a lot of things that have to work correctly together for the system to operate as expected. And so I think long term, absolutely. Shorter term, it may take people a little bit to truly understand and vet the technology from their perspective. But once people are comfortable that everything works the way it does, all of the important parts of the code are audited by multiple firms and everything looks good, then I think it will definitely increase TVL because it is a higher security threshold for it's basically as close as full ZK settlement to Bitcoin as you can get. So definitely think it'll increase TVL, but there may be that again waiting period for people to truly understand how the technology works and get fully comfortable with it.
All right. Moving on to some engineering questions. Luctasio asks, when will the new pop payout algorithm be deployed to mainnet?
We are targeting this week, but it may slip to next week because we're still doing some final testing. So I would set a drop dead date of end of next week.
Right. Uh, Luctasio again asks, can Hemi compete with Base and Solana as a blockchain for AI agents, especially with transaction speed and TPS?
Definitely yes. Hemi's approach in general, and this applies to everything from gaming to AI agents to high frequency trading. Our approach is keep the base layer small enough in the sense of total throughput, total amount of data, amount of processing needed to run a full node, that we can decentralize all of the components and run it as a performant but very decentralized, very secure base layer, and then scale out for use cases that need really high transaction throughput and lower cost using the chain builder L3 system. So optimize basically each chain for a different trade-off between cost, settlement speed, finality, whether the decentralization or lack thereof of the sequencing system, depending on what makes sense for the particular app. So the L3 that I mentioned that we're working on internally as sort of a prototype to show kind of the bare bones of chain builder and how people could customize kind of a chain system in the future. I think that one of the goals of that is to show how you could launch a very high frequency, high throughput system on Hemi with making a few trade-offs with sequencer decentralization, still having some sort of decentralized sequencer, but having a more controlled version of it that can operate with 1 to 2 second block times and handle you know 10, 20, 50x throughput at a minimum. One of the other things is the flexibility that we're building into the overall chain builder architecture. And some of this is still TBD and open design choices that we're making, but the overarching goal is to allow as much customizability as possible. And so that means for a lot of applications, today launching an L3 on most other networks basically looks like launching an EVM chain that is pretty much a clone of the L2, but just moved up a layer and maybe with some parameters tweaked, like it uses a different DA system instead of Ethereum for DA, so the DA costs are cheaper, or some more configuration level tweak. And the L3 that we're building as a sort of case study showcase is doing all of the stuff that's relevant to the protocol in Rust. And so it's you don't there's no EVM And it's limited in the functionality, but that's intentional because it's showing how you can build something that's totally different from an EVM environment, totally customized to a specific use case, and optimize for that and for the throughput, decentralization, DA needs, et cetera, that make sense for that specific protocol's use case. So I'd say definitely, but our approach to that is through L3s, not trying to infinitely scale the base layer, because the more you scale the base layer, the less uh, the less decentralization you can update the protocol to use in the future. And so we want to make sure the base layer can be as decentralized as possible and then scale out through the L3 architecture.
Also, a couple other points. I think one bit that's important is transaction speed is not the only or even the primary thing that matters for LLM usage. Like if you were to go when you go and you ask Claude or ChatGPT or whatever something, they're not always fast. In fact, this speed is just one of the things that's going on when it comes to LLMs, there's data volume is a big one too. So just thinking, oh, this blockchain has speed transactions doesn't tell you high speed transactions are good, but that tells you nothing about whether it's suitable for an AI usage or not. It's almost, it's just one of several things. So right away, transaction speed doesn't cross HEMI off the list or make HEMI at the top of the list of what you would want to use for AI. It really depends on what you're doing with the LLM or not what you're doing with the LLM, but what you want the blockchain to be doing for the LLM. And in the Solana case in particular, you have to remember, Solana is very centralized and is basically just they implemented the time chain part of the Bitcoin white paper, and that's about it. So it's made some trade-offs for speed, which means it's a lot more likely to drop a transaction, which maybe you're okay with that for your use case. For your LLM, you probably aren't. So do I think we can keep up with it? I mean, Base, they're doing good things. I think we're doing other good things. So depends exactly what you need. Solana, I think my opinions on it are very well known. I don't consider that a, competitor in this space at all. And again, you can't look at is this blockchain right for usage in LLMs? You have to think of what do I need? What does this LLM need from a blockchain? And from there, you can say what is the correct blockchain to use for it, or what features of the blockchain matter for it. And hopefully, HEMI in particular, when with the chain builder idea, well, actually, the chain builder idea kind of is, based around the idea that you ask that question of what features to the blockchain do I need for this LLM? And then you can say, okay, what kind of L3 can I build that would be right for that? And right for just that, which is a very useful way to do it.
And one other thing to add on the LLM side is it's not about scalability, but it's about security. So one of the unique things that you get using either HEMI as a base layer or using HEMI directly or using HEMI as a base layer for like an L3 customized to AI applications is with proof of proof you get Bitcoin timestamping. And so there's a lot of cool things in the LLM trust space that intersect with a lot of the work that people are doing in the space with ZK proving inference to be able to prove that an agent was actually executed correctly. So one of the things with LLMs that I'm sure everyone who's even touched an LLM is aware of is they're very expensive to run. You need very powerful computers. I think the top of the line single computer that has 8B300 GPUs is like $500,000. So the best performing LLMs in general, and we may see this change. Obviously, I would love to see more high performance frontier models that use better hardware, but at the end of the day, that's not the current state. So they're really expensive to run. So most people who want the highest end bleeding edge, best performing LLMs, they have to shove off that computing to some third party who provides it. And so for financial applications in particular, it's really important to make sure that the LLM is actually, the LLM model that you expect to be running is actually the one that's being run, and that it's being run correctly, and there's nobody who's manipulating the outputs of it to benefit them. And so, take for example an LLM that you're using for trading. Well, there's a lot of financial incentive for whatever compute provider you're offloading that compute to see that you're using it for trading, and then try to, maybe put their thumb on the scale somewhere to bias all of the trading agents they're running for other people to buy a certain asset that they're long in, or whatever. And so one of the things that you can do with ZK proving of inference is you can prove that the compute provider did actually run the correct model in the correct way with the inputs that you gave the system, or that it should have gotten from, on-chain data at a certain point in time or whatever. And you can also, if you're doing that on top of either HEMI directly or a HEMI L3, that's getting published to Bitcoin as well by proxy through publication aggregation that basically authenticates all of the data in HEMI and all of the L3 architecture to Bitcoin. So you get a timestamp of the data that was input into the LLM and a proof that the LLM inference actually ran correctly on that data. And then that is getting timestamped first to HEMI, so you have a very high granularity timestamped reference, and then to Bitcoin, so you have a very high security immutable reference of that LLM inference. And so if you ever do need to dispute something, you have a, the most secure cryptographic audit trail possible. And also, in most cases, if you build the technology correctly, there's not even a need to ever dispute anything in, a court of law or whatever, because you can prove that the LLM is always operating the way you expect by that compute provider. And so until we get, the optimal trading bot to be able to run on the average person's computer, there's always going to be a trade-off between, do you run a lower quality bot that's probably going to make worse decisions locally to keep your data, to make sure that the inference is being run correctly and it's not being manipulated by a third party, or do you use a third party who has the compute to be able to run these very big frontier models, but you trust them to not manipulate the outputs. And so with ZK provability, you can get around that. Obviously, there's additional computational overhead, so it's going to cost a bit extra to ask a third-party compute provider to ZK prove inference instead of just running inference normally. But for very, very high risk LLM applications, I think that's where the space is going to move to. And doing that in a place where it's all timestamped to Bitcoin provides that, ultimate audit trail of correct LLM inference behavior by third parties. So I think that's an interesting angle, and one of the things that we will definitely be covering in the bounty program is anyone who wants to work on a ZK proving system for inference and being able to validate those proofs on chain, either on HEMI directly or in a L3 on the HEMI network, to be able to then use the output of those LLMs to perform on chain actions.
Oh, right. On the subject of AI, because that is the new trend, Mudakan asks, AI agents have forever changed software development. How has HEMI adapted its systematic approach to software development to capture these efficiency gains?
It's a good question. So I think JCV will also have some interesting insights on this. So as I've said before, kind of November, December of last year, there was a major improvement to the quality of a lot of these coding agents, starting with Claude Code and Opus. Obviously, there was, it's been gradually building up and improving for, probably a year and a half, 2 years now, but we finally got to a point where we were comfortable using it, at least in some parts of our workflow, to improve, uh, various areas like writing more test cases for different parts of the code, writing things that are low risk and purely additive. And so I think I had mentioned this on a previous call, but one of the things I've been using a ton of AI on is building a EVM fuzzing system. And so that's basically you want to cover as many possible test cases as you can for analyzing an EVM execution environment, looking for divergence cases. As we move towards ZK provability, one of the things that we're going to be adding to the HEMI stack is a Rust implementation that is feature parity with the opgeth fork that we have, all of the HVM precompiles, managing the embedded Bitcoin node. And so we got to make sure that our instance of opgeth and our fork of the Rust version of Reth and the Reth implementation and the optimism stack inside of Kahlua and their ZK proving system that all of that is behaves identically, because if there's any even small divergence in the EVM implementation, then you get different behavior, which gives you different state roots, and then the chain diverges because the clients don't agree on what the current state of the chain is. And so for things like that, for an EVM fuzzer, AI is an amazing tool because you can give it, a list of 100 different ways that EVM execution could go wrong and tell it to write robust test cases that test all those edge cases, that perform mutations on those test cases, and it can go through and analyze different versions, different releases of each of the code bases, see which parts that affect the critical path through the code for EVM execution are actually touched and what changed, and it can do an automated analysis of that and see if there's any risks and anything else to add to the fuzzing test cases to adequately cover that. So things like that that are additive is a great place for AI, because obviously you want to make sure your EVM fuzzer works correctly, so you still want to review what it's doing. But that's the kind of thing where you don't need everything to be totally accurate. The goal is it's a shotgun approach, right? You want to get as much coverage as possible. And if the AI can add more test coverage or automate writing a ton of those test cases and, fuzzing mutation systems and whatnot, that's a great use case. And if it implements, one of those things wrong, well, at least you're still able to cover 99.9% of the test cases, more so than you'd be able to do writing that system by hand. So for things like that, absolutely. For other stuff, case by case basis, we're a lot of the ways that people are using AI to code today are fine for building a web app that your company uses internally for something, and if it breaks, then somebody can vibe code a solution and whatever the thing's down for a day. When you're working on critical infrastructure that has to run perfectly 24/7, has to be secure, has to be do everything that you expect it to do and nothing that you don't expect it to do, whether that's on the smart contract side or the daemon side, or front ends that we have for interacting with apps on the Heavy network. All of that needs to be very, very carefully designed, implemented, tested. And so you can use AI to some extent for pieces of that to, say, write a bunch of extra test cases or implement some functionality that then you're manually reviewing to make sure that it did it correctly and that it's testing every case that you expect. But you can't just vibe code a blockchain. That is a terrible idea. So we are using it. It has been an accelerant. It's been great for, like I mentioned, stuff like writing additional test cases that humans don't have time to write, for writing things like fuzzing systems. And it is great for reviewing changes to make sure that a change that a human made does look good, and see if maybe there's another angle to how that change could affect some other system that needs to be considered. So it's great for review. And if you use it correctly and very carefully, and you have a comprehensive plan and a spec, and you implement to that, and you make sure that your test cases handle everything that needs to be tested that you would do if you're implementing it manually, you can use it for adding features to something that is mission critical, but you have to be extremely careful with how you do that. So I'll throw it over to JC, because I think he also has some interesting thoughts on this, and maybe a different perspective from more of the security SecOps side as well.
Yeah. So first, before on the security side, the first bit is LLMs can write code. They don't write the best code in the world, but they write code. And if you push them in the right direction, encouraging tests and things like that, they write code that works. That's great. What AI or LLMs cannot do is understand a problem. You have to understand the problem and the path to the solution to it to be able to tell the AI what code to write. So right away, that shows, that you sort of have two paths there. There's the productive one where, where you understand the problem and you put the work into understanding the problem, and then you carefully push, Claude or whatever one you're going to use into working on the solution where you can get something good. Or there's the other path where you don't understand the problem and you just, try to vibe code your way into it, and you make a goddamn mess that you or someone else will regret later on. So, it's a tool. It's, the better it's a more powerful version of the autocomplete people who use um, the various UIs for writing code to do. It's a better version of that, but it still requires the deep understanding of the code. That's why we're careful about where we use it, because if you're writing the consensus mechanism for something, you actually have to understand the code. You can't just throw it out there and hope for the best. This is not, there's a lot of things in blockchain where just, write it and, hope that it works is really not going to be a good solution. That's the type of solution that causes a lot of people to lose a lot of money. So we're not doing that. We obviously are using it. It's another tool in our toolbox, but use it where we already understand the problem and we know what code it's writing for there. On the security side, you do have to think of it somewhat like, pretend you have an intern, and this intern is really good at writing code, but this intern also, grew up reading 4chan and whatever other horrible parts of the internet there are out there without supervision. That intern may be able to, and the intern is also, has been doing speed for the last, 3 weeks and doesn't sleep ever. You can get a lot of code out of that intern. You might even get some working code out of that intern, and you might even get a lot of working code out of them. But from a security standpoint, you need to review it. You need to put guardrails to make sure that shit does not go completely off the rails and you introduce a lot of security problems in it, because one of the things about security is it's not always a solved problem where there's a clear, this is going to be, there are best practices, but at the same time, security problems lie in the corner cases, and corner cases are the ones that still require human review, not just AI. That said, you can use AI really effectively to hunt for security problems, but that is deeply different than, oh, Rick, I might be talking about our intern. You don't know that.
Well, our intern may do speed, but there's no way he reads fortune or can code. We've met.
No, that's fair. But yeah, if you use it right, it can be great for finding the security things. But you're using it as you're almost using it as a different tool than you are for when it's being used to write code.
Also, just
Yeah.
add a funny anecdote to that. If this is a warning to be careful and actually analyze, if you are using an AI system to write code for you, that you do need to be manually reviewing it and seeing what it actually wrote and make sure that you understand it. I was using AI to write a bunch of test cases for the new pop payouts V2 algorithm, the smart contracts for it. And there was one test that it was having an issue with some of the stuff in hard hat and how to use it correctly. And so it wrote this test that structurally was correct, but there were some missing bits for how it was advancing the chain correctly with testing some timing edge cases and stuff. And so it was a pretty sophisticated test. It did a really good job of writing the right structure for the test that captured what I was trying to get it to actually test for. But it was, again, stumbling over some minor hard hat issue with block progression or something. And I wanted to see if I kept prompting it to keep working on it until you fix the issue, kind of hey, just go see if you can figure this out, instead of coming back with, I think the issue might be in blah blah blah, yeah, XYZ. So I tried to set it off in this automated path to keep iterating on the problem basically until it solved it. When it came back with a solution, what it had done is it kept all of the existing test code that was structurally correct, but it replaced the assert at the end to just compare a number to itself. And then it saw that the test was passing and it thought it was done. So yeah, AI, it's great. There's tons of, if you're using it correctly in your workflow, it can accelerate things, and it gives you a dimension of extra productivity that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, like getting more test coverage than you would ever be able to write by hand if you ever want to actually ship anything. But if it's very easy for AI to get off on a trail, and if you're not carefully watching what it's doing, You can either have an AI that works for a long time on the wrong thing, because it is a garbage in, garbage out system. Like JC was saying, if you don't have a very good idea of what exactly you're building, how it should work, how all the components fit together, all of the, depending on what it is, the security assumptions about what you're building, the underlying cryptography that needs to be used and how it needs to be orchestrated together, all of that, whatever you give it, it's going to come out with something that compiles and it runs and it doesn't do what you expect, or maybe if you don't know what to expect, it is just not doing, it's not solving the problem you set out to solve. And so, yeah, the test case it's a minor low risk thing, but it's a funny anecdote of, telling AI to go and keep working on the problem until you solve it, and its solution coming back as, well, if we just compare the number at the end that we expect to be getting, and oh look, I do that in the test passes. It's not a solution. It is the AI hallucinating what it thinks it should do, and then seeing that it test passes.
All right. We have one final AI question. Alex asks, when will Jeff be on Midweek with Max to speak about what he's building with AI agents and how to integrate it with HEMI? I think this is in reference to his recent tweets.
It's a good question. He's working on some cool stuff. That might actually make more sense as like a breakout session. So I'm not sure if that's something we do on Discord. Maybe that's something that we would do on an X space or something like that. But yeah, that would definitely be fun. I'd say probably not a Midweek with Max item. That would probably be better served as its own, like, you know, hour breakdown of actually like screen sharing and demoing stuff and things of that nature. So that is a cool idea. I think that is something that would be fun to do, either maybe in a Discord format or maybe in like a X Spaces or something.
The, we could do AI happy hour that we discussed last week.
We are definitely going to do an AI happy hour. Whether, yeah, I think the Jeff thing would probably be better as its own, focus. Like, hey, here's some actual cool stuff that we're building and how it orchestrates on HEMI versus our. I think our AI happy hour is a little more of chaotic.
Reasonable and completely fair. All right. Where was I? I got hyper fixated on AI happy hour. Uh, Luctatio asks, how does the total veHEMI staking rewards compare to the previous distribution?
I don't have the exact numbers for the previous distribution. This one's a little bit smaller than the previous distribution, but also some of a lot of the staking positions in veHEMI that were active for the initial distribution were from the original Genesis drop, and a lot of people chose the 6-month lockup for those. So a lot of those they have a lot less weight than they did previously. So for somebody who's staking the same amount of tokens but for a longer period of time. And again, I'd have to go and actually run math in a spreadsheet and verify this, but those people may be getting a larger proportional reward, even though the total reward is a little smaller this distribution, because of that. A lot of the original Genesis drop locked positions are close to their unlock date, and so they have very little weight in the system compared to somebody who chose a longer lockup. The short answer, the total size of the distribution is a bit smaller, but depending on if you have a position that's longer than the original 6-month lockup for the Genesis drop, either you chose a longer lockup option initially, or you voluntarily locked up additional HEMI tokens with a longer lockup since then, you may get a larger distribution because you represent a larger portion of the stake weight as some of those Genesis drop 6-month positions come to expiry.
We have two more sections to cover. So I believe a lot of this was covered at the beginning of the show, Max, but in the interest of folks just tuning in, uh, Tan Long asks, what is the status of the OG role in Discord linking system? Oh, excuse me, Discord wallet linking.
We did cover that, so the target is still the end of the month.
And a follow-up, will oh God, hopefully nothing to do with OJ. Will, will the will the OG role filter? Will the OG why am I having so much trouble with this question? It's very easy. Will the OG role filter users again, and how many people will be eligible? Jesus, that took a while.
So not quite sure on the question. So the original criteria that we announced for the OG role back in whenever that was, back in late August, early September, That's still the same criteria, so there won't be any additional filters beyond the original criteria we announced. But there will be a filter in the sense of there are requirements that you need to have for either on-chain activity and plus, being in Discord at a certain time. There's a checklist you need to meet. I think it was 3 out of the 5 qualification requirements, if I remember correctly. And so those requirements haven't changed, but those do effectively act as a filter, if that answers the question. What was the second part? So it was the will it filter? Oh, how many people will be eligible? I don't
Yes.
have an exact number on that. I'm not sure if Joshua or JCB, if you have an estimate. I know we ran some in the past, but I don't have the numbers in front of me.
It's a little hard to estimate because there are so many variables. We could calculate the amount of people who are eligible for each of the criteria, but together it will bring it down quite a bit, and it makes it just hard to calculate, so we don't have a very good or accurate number at this time.
Right. And I did post the criteria. Well, by posting the criteria, I mean I triggered the bot by typing when OG. So for those unaware, that's the criteria. Okay. Company/revenue questions. This is a new section. Alpha asks, how big is the team at HEMI Labs, and how does HEMI as a company generate revenue?
Team's pretty large. I don't have an exact count. I believe we're probably somewhere in the 30 to 40 range at the moment. And some of that changes as, there's obviously like the core team on protocol engineering, apps engineering, the smart contract side. But some of the other parts of the company, we have people who are full-time or full-time equivalent, but they're, working on, say, the marketing side, for example. And so sometimes if we're doing something big, we have people who come in and out depending on what the workload is for the given month. So it shifts a little bit, but I'd say somewhere in the, I believe, 30 to 40 range FTE. As far as revenue, I mean, high level, it's running the HEMI project. So that's not really a question I'm involved in on the day to day, but it's basically all just centered on the success of the HEMI protocol and the HEMI token, obviously.
All right. And a final question, which is a follow-up way. Peace Wayne asks, what is the revenue of the network right now?
So right now, so a lot of this is covered in the HEMI economic model. So I'll post a link to that HIPPO as the HIPPO number 2. So that's both kind of current status and future revenue streams for the protocol. High level, basically, at the moment, it comes from transaction fees. But as we start decentralizing a lot of the components of the protocol, including things with HBitVM, where we have operators and the HBitVM covenant emulators, with future things like Chain Builder for the shared sequencing, shared DA system, all of those things are new ways to, also with the MinerFi system, all of those are new ways to create additional revenue for the protocol out of new value creation. So being able to enable people to do new things on the HEMI network, that bringing in fees to the protocol for those specific, sub-protocol components. And a lot of that, the majority of that is going to be redistributed, collected by the respective subcomponents of the protocol, and then redistributed to people who are staking veHEMI and participating in each of those decentralized components of the network. So over time, as we have more use cases, as we launch HBitVM, the MinerFi system, Chain Builder, and the infrastructure required to run Chain Builder, those things will all generate additional use cases for the HEMI network and be able to capture additional value out of those that mostly flows back into the veHEMI system, either directly or through the, as we outlined in the HEMI economic model, the kind of protocol owned liquidity / evergreen protocol treasury that uses those assets to create liquidity in the system and then earn kind of ongoing protocol revenue on top of that then eventually goes out to the veHEMI stakers as well. So short answer, transaction fees, but longer answer, there's a lot of different types of transaction fees and value capture that will be added into the protocol as we decentralize additional components.
I believe Alex has an update. Alex, do you want to hop on stage, or do you want me to just announce it?
Yes, hello. Really quickly in this case. Yeah. So thank you. Yes, we have an update on Air. We have launched today Air Games, so you will be able to find it directly on our website. Actually, there is only one game. It's find the number. You have to find a number in 20 attempts, something like this. And we have to project to as target to release one new game by month. So normally the next one will be a memory game, and maybe normally after that will be a little game like Space Invader. So you can try this game right now. Just go on AirToken website, and we taking on each game $0.01 in fees, and all these fees will go in a pool, and we're using this pool to buy back and burn the air token. So come participate and make growth our project. Thank you, Rick, for the intervention.
And thank you, Alex, for the update. Hair Token Games is live, and special shout out to Alpha for helping develop that. Oh, I wish we could share some other stuff right now, specifically on the subject of games, JCV. Maybe when it gets closer. I don't want to. I don't want to spoil anything or anything like that. But just as a outro, thank you to our community moderators, and please remember to be active because Amigo of the Week is officially launched, and you can win a cool shirt, and everyone likes cool shirts. So with that, let me turn it over to Max, JCV, and Joshua for any outros. But beyond that, thanks all for joining. We will get this posted as soon as possible for recaps, etc. And that's it. That's it for me.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining another Midweek with Max, and we will see all of you next week. Stay tuned in the next couple weeks for open sourcing some of the ZK proving bits if you're interested in either playing around with or contributing to those, as well as helping to test those components in the beta tester channel. We are also going to be doing a breakout engineering AMA around all things ZK, from the ZK proving systems itself, the code that we're going to be open sourcing, HBit VM, ZK settlement to Ethereum, anything tangentially ZK related is all on the table for that AMA. And so we'll be getting that probably in the next, I want to say 2-ish weeks. So, mid-February-ish. And we'll also be, I think, doing our AI happy hour. So not sure when that's going to get scheduled, but that will be a lot of fun as well. And then other than that, stay tuned for Pop Payouts V2, either this week or worst case end of next week to play the mainnet. One other update I forgot to give on that at the beginning. We did get the final audit report for that back, and so that is now fully audited, so everything's on our side to finish up the remaining testing on Testnet and then get that deployed, so no external blockers on that. And yeah, I think with that, we will see everyone next week.
All right, Hemi strong, amigos, and Joshua indicated this is the first time in 2 months we've actually finished on time. Congrats, boys. We did it.
A very rare occasion.
Right. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you in Discord and on our socials. Take care.
All right, thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye bye.